Internships. Okay, let's go ahead and get started, shall we? I will go ahead and just change here. Great. Okay, awesome. Guys, welcome. We're so happy that you're here. My name is Larry Miller. I'm a news anchor at WUSA 9. I also host the show Federal Workforce Fallout. I am joined by everyone's good friend, career expert, um, CEO of FitzDrake Search, and author of the book Searching for a Job Sucks, Bill Fitzgerald. And Bill and I have done a lot of work together over the past, I think it's been almost a year now, Bill, where we've
I
been
know
talking.
it. I
It's been a
know.
long time, but we've been in the work. And this really was sort of born out of um, the place of trying to keep people educated and up to date about the changes that were going on in the federal workforce. And talking with Bill, I think Bill, you would agree that we certainly walked away with the recognizing that this was sort of bigger than just the federal workforce, but there were people
Yeah.
that just needed help all across the board. And so while our show continues to provide information about the federal workforce, and we are certainly committed to that for the long term, that we are also sort of broadening the scope and talking with those that are looking for maybe opportunities within the federal workforce, even those that are looking for opportunities in the private sector about sort of what's available, but sort of how the job search has fundamentally changed and how to get on board with the change so that you are successful. And Bill, we have worked with dozens of people so far that have found pretty tremendous success in
Yeah.
their abilities to find new jobs.
Yeah, no, we have. And I think one of the reasons we wanted to do this show was what we've realized is while it's helpful to write an article, helpful to write a book, what folks really need is to talk to somebody. And what Larry and I wanted to do is provide a vehicle where people could jump on, ask questions. If they want to share a resume, you can share a resume. But we want to provide that one-on-one kind of help that's really hard to find. And, we envision potentially doing some kind of a show on a weekly basis where people who need assistance, who have a question, it could be a very specific question, it could be a very general question, can jump on and get the kind of help they need that is frankly unavailable unless you want to go pay for a coach, which everybody can't afford to do. So we're happy to provide this service, and I am certainly thrilled. And I learn and become even more helpful as I listen to your questions and concerns. So, people can raise their hand, put something in the chat. I mean, whatever is on your mind is fair game this afternoon. So,
Yeah, so we'll go ahead and get started. And so I will just kind of walk you guys through a couple of housekeeping things. One, the show is being recorded for WSA 9 and our streaming platform. Again, if you have sort of personal sensitive information, say on a resume that you want Bill to look at, feel free to share it. I would just remove any sort of personal information on your resume so that information isn't disclosed to the wider public. This has been set up in sort of a forum format, right? The idea that we're able to talk, we're able to sort of kind of piece things together and be able to have sort of a safe space to talk about sort of what's going on and how do we move over those challenges as well. I'll start with one story that we Bill and I have had the opportunity to work on where I think about Pauletta James, for instance. This is
yeah.
a woman who had been looking for a job for the better part of a year as an executive assistant. And Bill, when you got her resume, there was a couple of things that you noticed in her resume that just with some minor changes, some minor tweaks, was really going to catapult her to sort of getting in front of people that are going to be able to make some decisions and fundamentally change her life.
Yeah, I mean, the challenge with her resume, as you recall, was, you find a professional summary at the top of your resume, and her particular resume and her summary was so broad that somebody like myself, and I should clarify, I am a recruiter. I'm one of the guys, one of the people who are looking at your resumes and working with hiring managers on a weekly, daily basis. And when I saw Paulette's resume, the question I had that immediately came to my mind is, what are you? Because she was trying to be all things to all people with the idea that if she's general, she'll get, more people will pay attention to her background. And what she quickly learned in some of the work we did with her was the more specific you are, you actually open yourself up to more opportunities because people like me and hiring managers, we don't have to guess what you are. And frankly, most recruiters are not going to take the time to try to understand what you are if it's just so broad. So we were able to really tighten up the fact that she's an expert executive assistant as opposed to an HR administrator or an HR specialist or a paralegal. We were able to really zero in on what makes her great, which in this market, I would tell everybody is just absolutely critical to be able to claim some area of expertise that people like myself can quickly grab onto. The other thing about her resume that we were able to really improve upon was there was no real statement about what she was responsible for in her jobs, and there was no distinction between responsibilities and accomplishments. And I can't tell you how critical that distinction really is. So we were able to give a clear description of what she was responsible for, but more importantly, or as importantly, we were able to work on her accomplishments so they really spoke to outcomes and how she was making a difference, as opposed to just some statements from a job description. So we were able to not only improve her resume, but here's the other benefit of going through that exercise, because for me, it is never a wordsmithing exercise. What we were trying to do is get you ready to interview. And for Paulette, she was able to say clearly, I'm an executive assistant. Here's what I've been responsible for. And here are three or four of my accomplishments. And once you're able to articulate that to a recruiter or a hiring manager, you become a lot more interesting a lot more quickly. So those were the changes we made for her. And it led to some pretty quick success.
Yeah, I want to share something quickly from your book, Bill. Searching for a job sucks. And one of the things that
Yeah.
you say is that no one cares who you are if you can't be clear about what you are.
Yeah. Yeah. I just can't thank you, Alicia. I just can't emphasize how important that is. And I understand the panic of trying to find something and the need to kind of cast a wide net. But if you don't in this market, I mean, it's always been important, but I think it's critical in this market that you've got to claim some area of expertise. You can't be all things to all people. And it's what I know you've probably done many things, but what are you great at?
Hmm.
What are you great at? And that's what's going to get, again, think about your reader, which is me. What's going to get my attention if somebody like an employer, a client in my case, gives me a job to fill? They don't say to me, Bill, go find somebody who's kind of average. Go find somebody who would like to do this job, or go find somebody that you know is kind of okay. They say to me, go find the best person you can possibly find. And that's what a recruiter and that's what a hiring manager is looking for. They're looking for that expert.
I think we have our first question, and we'll start with
Okay.
Susan. Susan K. Good afternoon, Susan.
Hey,
Good
Susan.
afternoon. Hi, Bill. Hi, Larry. I think I've met both of you, Bill, at a lot of these events, and Larry, I was at one of the WellFed events where you
Yeah.
were, and it was awesome. Thank you so much for all the work you guys have been doing. My question I'm really excited to hear about the success you've seen with the people you've been working with. I've been
Yeah.
on the market for a year now, and I've had quite a few interviews. I think one of my issues is my is years of experience. I have a lot over 25 years working in international development and pivoting to even if it's similar work like business development, capture managers, things like that outside of
Right.
international development. People look at me and say, well, you have a lot of years, you might not know the agencies. So I try to limit how much emphasis I put on my years of experience, but I still think I might be overlooked, because of that. So do you have
Yeah.
any suggestions on that? There's
Well, there,
something to learn. I mean, I'm happy to take a position that requires 7 years of experience, even if I have a lot, because I can learn from it, you know.
Yeah, and Susan, the fact that you're asking a question, what I'd invite you to do, I'm going to put my email in the chat here. You are welcome at FitzDrakeSearch.com. You're welcome to send me your resume. Let me take a
Which one
peek
though?
at
I
it.
have so many versions
Well, see that's
of
part
different jobs.
of
Yeah.
that's part of the challenge. I would say let's start with one and go from there. But to answer your question, I mean, there's a couple of layers there. Um, Certainly, one of the questions that often comes up is what about age discrimination? And fact is, it's out there. It's real. At different points in the process, there are things you can do to mitigate that somewhat. So if you think about the very, very early stages, putting together your resume, um, it's common for people to say, for example, in a professional summary, 25 years of experience doing this, 30 years of experience doing that. So leave that out. I mean, you don't have to emphasize the years of experience as opposed to business development executive working with, that, eliminates that right from there. And then the other thing too is as you're capturing your experience on your resume, what most recruiters are going to pay attention to are like the last 10 or 15 years of your experience. And I say that with some hesitation because it varies for everybody. It kind of depends on what you were doing then, where you were working then, because there may be some things you want to highlight. But beyond that, you may have another 20, 25 years of experience, which you're going to need to list. And you could have a section called additional professional experience where you put the company and the title, but you don't need to put the dates. Okay. But you need to list it because recruiters are going to ask about, where were you? You kind of look older than 20. So you were either in a coma or, incarcerated. I mean, where were you? So they're going to want to try to fill in those blanks. So at that early stage, don't do anything that would tip off to a recruiter that you're a little bit older. And I think the other piece is, we dealt with this with, Larry mentioned Paulette. This distinction between responsibilities and accomplishments is so critical. And it's even more critical the older you get, because what a recruiter's going to be looking for are statements where you've clearly spelled out how you've made a difference. Because once that becomes clear, and as a hiring manager, I can see how you're going to solve my problem, which frankly is the only reason you get hired. Okay, be clear about that. The only reason you get hired is because you can solve some employer's problem. And the way you demonstrate that is how you articulate your accomplishments on the resume. Okay. So those are things you can do up front. And then, after that, if you're fortunate to get to be seen, and we'll talk about that, and you get an interview, that's where you want to shine and really talk about how you achieve those accomplishments in such a compelling way that that hiring manager can actually see you in the job. Short of that, if some hiring manager is predisposed to not hire somebody who may be older, I'm not sure there's a lot you can do about it, Susan. You mean you need to find those organizations, and AARP for the longest time had a list of those organizations that had taken a pledge not to discriminate based on age. It's a place to start perhaps, but at some point, there's just not a lot you can do to overcome if somebody's just got this predisposition in the back of their head. But the more you can articulate your accomplishments and how you make a difference, the more they will be able to see you in that role.
I have a
But
quick
again,
follow-up question because sometimes they also think that you take a role that might be less senior than you've had in the past, and then they
yep,
think you're going to leave
that's
because
right.
you'll either get bored or you'll want more, you know. And I've
Yep.
actually to try to convince somebody to interview somebody who was applying for a job that was lower than him. And the person said, well, we've had trouble with people who had too much experience and they didn't last long. So how do you also convince them that you're accepting the job for what it is and that you're
Yeah.
committed to it,
I mean, part of the challenge, Susan, is that has happened, and it does happen. I mean, somebody will take um, a job, a click or two below where they've been, and as soon as maybe the employment market opens up, these other opportunities do appear, and people do leave, and that's why employers are reluctant. I think the best way to address that is to be as heartfelt, as honest with an employer as you can in terms of, you've climbed the ladder. You're looking for an opportunity at this point. You're not looking to, you know, climb the ladder. You've done that, been there, done that. You're looking for an opportunity to contribute. You've got the accomplishments where you can truly make a difference. And be clear, I'm looking to work another 5 to 7 years. I'm not interested in retirement. So I think in a heartfelt way, you communicate that and see if it resonates with an employer.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sure.
And Bill, I want to also piggyback off of that too, because I think, considering your professional experience, the people that we've worked with USAID, we've had to be sort of very strategic in terms of sort of the approach. One, because effectively the international aid community has been sort of decimated, right, as a result of the
Sure.
dismantling of USAID. And so there have left very few opportunities for people to find those other sort of segues. And so it might be helpful sort of looking at non-traditional organizations as a means of sort of providing you that next opportunity. I know a lot of folks have gone into academia, they've been able to find opportunities in the private sector. So it might also be helpful to get a little bit more creative too in terms of where you're applying, because
Yeah.
given your experience and the uniqueness of it,
Yeah.
that certainly does satisfy a lot of problems that I think a lot of private companies and larger companies are dealing with right now.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at like today's jobs report, Larry, I think it had like 130,000 jobs were created in the last report. Now, 123,000 of those were in healthcare. So if I were a former USAID person, I mean, that would be an industry to be looking in and how I could transfer my skills from that organization, whether it was in a business development capacity or a contract management capacity, how you could transfer those skills very easily into a sector where they are hiring. But again, it goes back to, being clear about what you were, because I've worked with folks from the State Department, I've worked with folks at USAID, and you've got business development people, you've got communications people. All those skills transfer very nicely into the private sector. It's just a matter of communicating that up front as clearly as possible and claiming that level of expertise so somebody like myself can see it.
Awesome, Bill. Thank you so much, and,
Sure.
and thank you, Susan, as well. Let's go to Amber. Amber W. Hello. Good afternoon, Amber.
Good afternoon, Larry. Thank you so much for this enlightening conversation. And Mr. Fitzgerald, thank you so much for being here. I actually became acquainted with you with Georgetown's Pivot with a Purpose.
Oh, great.
Yeah, incredibly grateful for your time. And I kind of want to pick up on what our colleague said before regarding, unconventional jobs. I've been kind of advised to pursue jobs that will help pay the rent and or the mortgage. So I kind of categorize those as bridge over jobs. And so, they're not necessarily, they're using some of your skills, but they're not the big grand job that maybe, you're aspiring for. And so I guess my question for you is, how do we, or even should we, capture those jobs on our resume? So jobs that are kind of bridge over, that maybe be outside of our level of seniority, but they are jobs that are needful for us at this time. Any thoughts over?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends. I mean, I know some folks who've gotten jobs at Home Depot. I know some folks that have, taken jobs in other retail areas. And, I don't know if those are jobs you necessarily have to um, share on your resume as much as you need those jobs just to pay the rent, pay the mortgage, and, pay whatever bills you have coming in. Um, I would keep your resume focused on the professional level experience uh, that you have and that you want to pursue. I don't, again, it's all very individual. It would depend on specifically the kind of jobs. But if it's not in that professional realm, um, I don't see a real reason to include that on your resume.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, that's my question for now. Thank you so much. I
Sure.
appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Guys, if you have additional questions, please feel free to raise your hand. I'm going to go to some questions that were in the chat.
Okay.
Sorry, guys, my glasses are good, but not that good. I think Luann G here was asking for resources to help those that have worked sort of in an international space, potentially for a USAID, translate those skills in a meaningful way to those that are working in the private sector.
One of the things that I've done with some folks, and you can use different forms of artificial intelligence to do this, but we've actually used like ChatGPT to say, this is what I've been doing at USAID. What does this look like in the private sector? And it'll give you examples of of what those jobs might be that you can pursue. So that would be one of the first things I would do is I would use some of those resources to help make that translation.
Yeah, and I think, Bill, to your point, so many companies now, I mean, the vast majority are having to think global when they think about sort of a customer base and revenue generating opportunities. And the fact is that if you've worked at USAID, being global is what it's all about. And so you have a familiarity, connections, opportunities worldwide as relates specifically to what issues, what problems you can satisfy for a company here in the States, if that's what you so
Yeah.
choose. And so I
Yeah.
think if you really thought about your experience in that way, as global as it is, as niche as it is, I think that you really would open yourself up to the fact that so many businesses would benefit and be grateful to have
Absolutely.
someone with your skills. Yeah.
Absolutely. Because you've got skills around, international skills that have to do with problem solving, that have to do with working cross-functionally, that have to do with pulling disparate groups of people together to solve problems. And those are skills that most folks don't have. So, finding those organizations with large international operations, might be a great place to look.
I want to go to this question from Stephanie Silva here. She says, following up on ageism and seemingly overqualified, at what point should we start de-emphasizing years of experience? As specific example, is 15 years already risky in this labor market?
15 years total? If that's the, Stephanie, if that's the question,
And Stephanie, you can feel free to come off of mute and chat with us too.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, 15 years of experience is not something that would put you in the category of being overqualified. I mean, typically when I run into that, folks, it's somebody who's been in the workforce 25, 30 years, maybe a little bit longer, and they've been more senior, they've been like a director, they've been like a VP, and now they're applying for maybe a manager level job or maybe even an individual contributor job, and they get looked at as way overqualified. And that's when we were talking to Susan earlier. It's really important to be able to have that when you get the opportunity to have the conversation with that hiring manager about where you are in your life, what it is you hope to accomplish. Let them know that, and this is another important point, let them know it's not only the job that has attracted them to you, but it's the company and its mission. This company is doing something that on a personal level I care about. So I'm not somebody who's gonna just job hop. I'm somebody who is more focused on the work I'm doing and how not only am I going to make a difference, but how this organization is going to make a difference. I mean, so much of this, folks, when you get into that point in the process, I mean, we're talking about interviewing. I said earlier, the only reason you're going to get hired is because you can solve a problem. Beyond that, the other reason you get hired is because there's a chemistry between you and the person that you're, speaking with. So at some point, it's less about selling and more about telling them why you're a good candidate for a role, in spite of what may appear to be way too many years of experience for the role you've applied for.
Bill, Stephanie adds, she's having some microphone issues, but she says that there are many roles for which I and others feel both over and underqualified. And this gets worse as you're advancing your career. JD might ask for 7 to 10 years, and you have 15 years plus, but not in the specific, quote, traditional profile for that role. So I think probably what she's getting at too is, considering your experience, it may not be sort of directly aligned, but a lot of what you've done in your professional capacity sort of spills over, and there are a lot of transferable skills that would sort of benefit you in that new role. Does that impact your ability to sort of secure that opportunity, considering sort of how your resume is written and formulated?
Yeah, I mean, I think it can. Again, remember what you're trying to show in your resume is how you can sell and solve an employer's problem. And the mistake a lot of people make is rather than think through accomplishments, and I'll give you a way to think about it. They almost have statements from a job description. And what I'll often see, people will give me a resume and there'll be bullets, right, next to their accomplishments. So here's the question you want to ask yourself after every bullet. Why did that matter? A snarkier way to ask that question is so what? And if you've ever heard the expression around asking why 5 times, you want to answer the question with another bullet and then ask yourself again, why did that matter? Because what you're trying to do is get as close as you can to some kind of result. When I'm reading a resume, one of the ways I can tell that we've gotten to that point, and it's a very simple formula, and it's basically outcome and action. So I'll see something written, here was the result, here was the impact, and then I see the word by, what you did. So when I'm helping people get their resumes together, I try to help them formulate their accomplishments using that formula. Because when you get there, you're really getting close to how you've made a difference. The other thing I see Larry putting something up here, but the other thing I'll say about years of experience, which is really interesting, and again, you're going to get the perspective of a recruiter here. Um, a lot of hiring managers, frankly, I mean, when you ask them how many years of experience does somebody need, it's almost a finger in the air. I mean, they take a best guess at it. And as a recruiter, I don't often pay a lot of attention to someone's years of experience. I am going back to what have they done? What have they accomplished? Um, the years of experience. I mean, if somebody, says uh, we're looking for 7 to 10 years of experience as a cost accountant, and you're just coming out of school, yeah, that's probably going to be a stretch. But if the job description is looking for 7 to 10 years of a cost accountant, and you've got 4, there's no harm in pursuing that opportunity. Now, how you pursue that opportunity is a whole nother conversation we will have either today or sometime down the road. But Larry, you've got something up here. Oh, there it is. Okay. Yeah.
this is a resume that you are quite familiar with. As you can see,
Yeah.
Bill went to work on this resume, and I'm just showing you part of it because the rest of it was pretty bloody. Um, and I say that with love, I promise.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But getting back to your equation, Bill, this
Yeah.
outcome, action, outcome results by what you did, I think really is a great sort of algorithm here when we think about sort of the way in which one should talk about their work at a past employer.
Yeah, I mean, this is Larry, I'm glad you brought this up. This is a great example because, guys, if you look at achievements, the very first bullet, where we won't say who, designed and executed advanced scheduling strategies for C-suite leaders, decreasing last-minute changes by 30% and enhancing executive productivity through seamless coordination across multiple departments. Now, that's better than most, but look at the difference in terms of the rewrite. We start with the outcome. And again, I'm a hiring manager, and you just need to continually think about your audience here. They're a hiring manager with an open position and they are in pain. Work's not getting done. People are staying late. They may have internal customers that aren't happy. They're looking for that perfect person that can come in and solve their problem. So you rewrite some of this stuff, decrease last minute changes by 30%. And for executive assistant, that's an important thing. By designing, execute advanced scheduling strategies, blah, 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 blah. Okay. So what you're seeing there is we're really focused on outcomes first and action second. What you often find, I don't know if Larry can scroll down if there's any others that we could, yeah, maybe not. Um, yeah, there it is, achievements. You see that question I'm asking? Why did that matter? Developed and created over 15 training materials, process documents, screen recordings, blah, 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 across three. Like, so what? Why did that? I don't mean to start, I don't mean to sound snarky, but it's like, why did that matter? And you want to translate that into an outcome. And I think we did that, reduce process project execution by 20%. Yeah, so the one above that, they developed flowcharts and enhanced clinical support. And we translated that back into reduced project execution by 20%, improved leadership knowledge transfer consistency. So again, that is what a recruiter is looking for. They're not looking for activity. They're not looking for process. And that is the mistake a lot of people make when they're putting together these documents. They don't focus on how they've made a difference.
And certainly that equation was even helpful for me, Bill, when I was thinking about not just myself personally, but also loved ones as well. It's like, we never really think about sort of the resume telling that sort of story, whereas more
Yeah.
outcome driven, results
Yeah.
driven, as opposed
Yeah.
to a job description of what you did. It's
Well,
really
and
the
yeah,
impact that you've had.
and you talked about USAID earlier, Larry. I mean, my experience in the last, like you said, year, working with folks coming out of the federal government, they have a tendency to talk a lot about action or process. And that's where I often find myself asking them, so why did that matter? It's the so what question. And what I find is when you press them a little with those questions, the answer's there. Well, we did that because the result was we reduced this, or we increased this, or we improved this. Well, that's what you want to lead with. So that's why doing this process alone is sometimes hard because you almost need somebody to challenge you a little bit and ask those tough questions. And it could be a former colleague, it could be a friend, it could be a family member. Um, somebody who will ask those questions and just force you to think a little bit further about why what you did mattered. And again, don't think of this as wordsmithing because when you get into an interview, what the interviewer is going to ask you about is, Oh, you reduced this by 20%. Larry, tell me how you did that. And that's where you immediately get the formula around situation, action, result. Star method, however you want to describe it. Now you're in a position to talking to that hiring manager about, well, here's what I needed to do. I put together a cross-functional team. We put together a project plan, and you start talking about some of the soft skills that matter to that organization so they can start to see you in that role inside of your company. But it all starts with what you accomplished. No one wants, and I've seen people do this. They've literally taken the bullets from a job description and they've put them on their resume. And it just doesn't work.
At all. And guys, I'm going to get to your question too. If I skip it, just rewrite it or just copy and paste it in the chat so I can go back to it. I want to get to Miss Elliott. She said something that was really interesting in her question. She said, in today's job market, is a year-long unemployment or longer a terrible signal to future employers? How much additional vulnerability does such a gap create for job seekers?
You know, I would tell you, I think years ago, um, again, speaking as a recruiter and hiring manager, hiring executive, that would always be a little bit of a red flag. Um, what I would say to you now is less so. Particularly if you're somebody, I mean, I don't know where everybody in the on the call is from, but if you're all local or yeah, reasonably local and connected to the federal government, everybody knows what's gone on.
Mm.
I had one woman who was trying to convince me that the reason she couldn't find a job was because she was let go when her whole department basically was let go in a particular office of the federal government. And I just couldn't get her to understand that people get that. And you don't need to try to explain that away. So, the fact that you've been out a year and you've been part of this whole bloodletting at the federal government, people get it. And you don't need to go on, as I've seen and heard some people do, and explain why. Hey, Bill, I was at this person I know, I was at the State Department and they eliminated my department and we've all been on the market since. Okay, move on. So I think right now it's not as big an obstacle as it was years ago.
Yeah, it seems like people are rather tapped in, which is interesting because
Yeah.
Bill, that last show that we did when you were here in Washington, I know you missed the snow. Um, um, we had someone on the show from USAID
Yeah.
who has been able to secure a new opportunity, and one of the questions I asked specifically was, did you feel a bit hesitant about putting USAID on your resume, given the way in which some in the administration had sort of mischaracterized the work, the output, and the impact of that agency on the goals of the any administration and sort of advancing national interests? And she said no. She said, "Listen, I worked there for decades. I did good work.
Yeah.
I had an impact and I was committed to sharing that. And it wasn't anything that came up in the interviews that I had. No one asked about USAID in terms of the way it had been mischaracterized by some in the administration. That
Yeah.
oftentimes it was whether or not she was the best fit for the role."
Yeah. I mean, listen, if there are some people predisposed negatively towards folks from USAID, there's nothing you can do about it. But again, it goes back to your ability to take control of the narrative. So one of the things I tell folks when they're putting together their resume is they're going to list, after their professional or executive summary, they're going to get into their professional experience. And one of the first things they're going to list is where they worked. And what I tell folks to do, and this is particularly true, and frankly was enlightening for me with the folks from USAID, was give us a 1 or 2 sentence statement. I say put it in italics so it stands out, that describes that organization. so that the reader has the same understanding of USAID that you do, as opposed to what they've heard from the administration, where it's been highly disparaged. I mean, I don't know if there's anybody in the group who was there, and I'm one of those citizens who I knew it existed. I had no idea the impact that organization was having around the world, and the impact, its value, its importance. Um, and I think I'm probably much like many people, which is why I would not back down from the fact that you were at USAID, but I would make sure on that when you list it, you have a very clear description around, who they are and the impact they've made around the world, because it is very, very impressive. Very impressive.
Absolutely. Um, Erica S, we've seen you flash up a couple of times. I just wanted to see if you had any thoughts that you wanted to contribute.
Um, I was sorry, I didn't mean to
Oh, no,
to
no
be
worries.
I should have probably put myself on mute. My apologies.
No worries at all. Okay, well, we're excited that you're here, and thank you for contributing. I want to get to another question from Phyllis, Phyllis Russell. She talks about sort of the gatekeepers with some of these opportunities that trying to get past them when they have deemed you overqualified for a particular role can be a bit challenging. Bill, do you have any advice for those gatekeepers that could be sort of a roadblock to you getting to maybe a larger interview or maybe even a final offer about maybe what you can do with these individuals in particular to help you get to the next stage in the interviewing process?
Well, there's a couple of levels there. I mean, one is a question of how you're applying. If you see a job, for example, posted online, um, one way you get around those gatekeepers is applying directly to that hiring manager. And there are ways to do that, from leveraging that professional summary statement, which I really help people, or I really encourage people to generate that one sentence statement that is just so powerful that it'll convince a hiring manager that they can't live without that person. And then using that and finding that person's email and going directly, sending that hiring manager an email directly with your first sentence, first paragraph is that summary statement, I am a, and the second paragraph, second sentence, very interested in the job at Joe's Rag Shop. And then here, the key then is you take your resume and you copy and paste it in the body of that email. The big challenge, and I'll address this again, Larry, but the big challenge in this market, and I'm old enough, full disclosure, remember the days when you applied for a job, you just sat by the phone and hoped someone would call you. Oh, please call me. I need a call today. It's changed. The challenge now is getting seen. And with all the technology that's in place to prevent that from happening, is the reason why I really push folks to try to go as direct as you can, whether it's a referral from a friend, referral from a friend who used to work there who knows somebody there. I mean, I was talking to somebody the other day, yesterday, and she was working with somebody who knew somebody in an organization she wanted to apply for, and she was trying to find a way to get that resume in front of that hiring manager. So, kind of step one, it's going around the system. Step two, once you're in that process and you run into somebody and you just get the vibe, and I think, we've all seen it, we all know it. You're in an interview, um, you're not connecting for one reason or the other. Um, the best you can do is either make sure the following interviews are better, but what you can also do is, after that interview process or that interview day or sequence is over, is follow up that interview with a note to, um, whether the person who is like leading the process, asking them to share that with the teams, thanking them for the opportunity, but also using that as an opportunity to highlight several bullets about based on what you've heard, here's how I believe I can contribute and do it in a way that speaks to the problems they're having and that you believe you can solve. So, they're there. I mean, and we all have probably had one of those interviews in our career where you just know that this isn't going well. We are not connecting. And sometimes if that's the case, it may be something that is worth walking away from.
No, that's some really good, helpful information. But Bill, you've talked a lot about sort of the power of the network and
Oh yeah.
that can do. A quick story that I'll share. I'm celebrating 11 years at WSA9. I remember applying several times for an opportunity here, and it wasn't until I had, when I was working in Birmingham, Alabama, and I had a conversation with my general manager, and I said, "Listen, I want to go back and work in DC. That's really where I want to go." He's like, "Larry, you've done great work here. I'll make a call for you." And he called the news director who was here at the time and got me an interview within 2 weeks of that time. And that
Yeah.
wasn't because, he had seen my resume. It was because his friend called him and gave him a recommendation. And I came for the interview. And so the rest is history. And so when I think about the power of a network, it can be, my general manager and I didn't have a lot of interactions because, his job as an executive was much different from my job as a reporter because I was always out in the field. But just having your work speak for itself and even having those conversations, those light conversations in the hallway went a long way. When I needed a favor, he was able to deliver. And so I still check in with him to this
Yeah.
day to see how he's doing. And so I think that's probably another important component of this. You don't realize how connected you are to your next job until you actually start to tap into it, that the connections are out there. You know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody. And so I
Yeah.
think,
Yeah.
especially when you're in this situation now, it's important to really tap into everybody that you possibly know that can look out for and provide support.
Yeah. I mean, this is a whole conversation unto itself, but Larry's, you're absolutely right. And yet one of the things I'd ask everybody on the call to do right after the call is over is whether you use your phone, a Word document, or something. I would ask you to do this. Write down the names of three people who at some point in your career have been a coach, have opened doors, have provided advice, made a referral, who have been there when you needed assistance. And write down those three names. And then ask yourself, when was the last time you reached out to that person simply to say hello and ask how they're doing and to give them an update on how you are doing? And it all speaks to Larry's point about networking. And I would really reframe this because I think networking gets a bit overused because what you really need to engage in is what I would describe as a relationship building exercise. I mean, one of the things that I share with folks, if I can grab them quickly, I can put them in the chat, are some templates that you can use to reach out to folks. And it's not reaching out asking for a job. It's reaching out asking for advice. And there's four, so in those emails, which is what they normally are, you're sending an email to somebody. In that email, you're listing three or four questions that you'd like to ask them. And they're not, do you have a job at your company for me? Those are not, it's, what do you see happening in our field? What do you see happening in our industry? How is AI influencing the way work gets done in our industry? What do you think employers will be looking for with people in the marketing or finance field, going forward? You're teeing up a conversation with the goal of rekindling a relationship, because what you want to do is put yourself in a position where you can ask four critical questions. Okay. And these are worth really noting. One is, who else should I talk to? Who else should I know? Who else might have a point of view that I would find helpful given what I'm up to? Secondly, do you know any recruiters that you like and respect? That that I might be able to reach out to? Because here's what I would tell you as a sidebar. Recruiters can be really helpful, but they are really hard individuals to connect with because when they need you, they love you. And I'm sure many of you have had this experience. When they need you, they love you. And when they don't, they'll kick you to the curb. And it's just the nature of the profession, unfortunately. But if you can get a warm referral to somebody like me, well, I'm gonna respond and I'm gonna have a conversation. Three is, can I reach out and give you an update in 5 to 6 weeks? Okay. Um, and most people are going to say yes, so do it. You'd be shocked at how many people don't. And fourth, anything I can help you with. I mean, look at your resume. Have you been doing some stuff around AI? Have you been doing something in your field that the person might find interesting? But the goal is to continue that conversation because what I hear from people, well, I reached out to 4 or 5 people and nothing happened. Well, um, that's because you didn't tee it up as a relationship building conversation. You teed it up as a transactional conversation. So here's something else I want to share with folks. Write down myvitalfew.com. Okay? Myvitalfew.com. If you are a Mac user, and right now that's what it's designed for, we've developed a Mac OS application that will actually help you navigate this entire networking process, relationship building process. It's got some really cool tech. So you can actually upload all of I don't know if people realize this, but you can actually download all of your LinkedIn connections. I mean, LinkedIn gives you the directions on how to do that. You can upload them into this app. And then if any of you, and no self-disclosure required, have ever been on a dating app, like a Tinder. Full disclosure, I did. I've been married over 40 years, so I didn't tell my wife, but it was for research purposes only because I wanted to understand how it worked. Alicia likes that. So what you can do is you can actually do something with LinkedIn because I will tell you, LinkedIn, other than being a database for a job seeker, it's awful. But what you can do with this app, you can now sort your LinkedIn connections into groups. Your first group is your My Vital Few. Your second group is what we call it, your next important group. And the third group is your least important group. And what it allows you to do is actually find the gold you have in LinkedIn that you don't even know exists. And when I talk about how to start this process, it's using these templates and reaching out to people and teeing up these relationship building conversations and building this army of people. So for these Mac users, this myvitalfew.com will be a game changer because it links to your calendar, it links to your email, there's journaling capabilities, the templates are built in, but it's what you need to maintain this effort on an ongoing basis. And at the end of the day, folks, your next role is likely going to come from through some relationship. It may not be anybody you know right now, but there's all this research around loose connections where it's the connection to the connection to the connection. That is how these roles are going to appear for you. So stop spending time pounding on the easy apply button and focus more on building those relationships that'll lead to these opportunities.
All right, certainly some good advice there, Bill. Thank
Yep.
you for that. I want to get to something that was said in the chat too, as well. There were questions about sort of understanding the metrics, right? When we say, I have increased efficiency within my department by 30%, I've done this by 20%, I've had this sort of outcome.
Yep.
There were questions about where exactly does one find this data? And in some cases, at least one person raised that sometimes that data is sort of made up. How do you make sure that you sort of are able to communicate your effectiveness in the office without compromising your integrity? if the data isn't available?
If the data is not available, I mean, if you've been doing this work, hopefully there's something that you can recall that's as close to that as possible. I mean, what I am describing is the bullseye that you want to get to. If the best you can do is just say improved efficiency, well, then just say improved efficiency or reduce customer complaints. If you can't cite a specific number, for heaven's sakes, don't make it up because that's employers will look at that with an eye of skepticism. But you can say to them, I don't have access to the data, but I know we improved customer satisfaction. I know we reduced the number of defective widgets that we pushed out the door. Get as close to that ideal as you can. And oh, by the way, you can always reach back into your history, colleagues you worked with, former bosses, and ask them the question, hey, we did this great project. We impacted customer sale or customer support. Is there any data out there that you can share that I can leverage as I'm putting together my resume? Somebody may have that data, even if you don't, but if you can't get it, it's still get as close to that as you can and avoid what I described kind of the activity trap. I scheduled meetings, we got together. None of that is going to make a difference. None of that's going to make a big impact on a recruiter.
Yeah, and Susan also adds, which is another good suggestion, you have your performance reviews, use them to your advantage because they give you
Heck
great
yeah.
information about your outcomes.
Heck yeah. I mean, sometimes you don't have access to those, but I would certainly, if you can, there's going to be data on there that you may be able to leverage on your resume.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It is 1:58 here on the East, and we have to end our conversation there for today. Bill, I think we had such a good time. We're going to do this again next week too. So
I hope so.
I put that on your schedule. You didn't agree to it, but I just said it. So, so we'll certainly do this again. I think we've had a great conversation today, and I think there's a lot of great information for us to walk away with in terms of how to approach the sort of job search and what no doubt is a tough job market. And I think what Bill does so beautifully is try to provide you with real tangible advice that you can take away and implement at home as you are trying to make connections for the next opportunity. So we'll do the same thing next week. We'll come back here Wednesday, 1 o'clock. We'll post the link on LinkedIn. We hope that you'll join us. If there was a question that we didn't get to, please email Bill. Also, if you have resume questions, reach out as well so we can provide some support. We appreciate you being here. And remember, you can also stay connected with us on our website at WSA9.com for federal workforce fallout, which also streams on WSA9 Plus. Bill Fitzgerald, thank you, sir. And thank you all for being here. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate it.
Bye, guys.